any reality television of late?
I mean, Love Island is back. So that's
Is it back?
consuming my life.
I wouldn't know. I do not partake in Love Island. However, has there been any interesting things going on?
I mean, yes, always interesting. I was trying to decide whether or not I could feasibly do an episode on it for this, but I don't think there's been properly anything that I can even pretend is religion-based at the moment, other than just engagements with it. But I thought you would like to know that there is a Welsh lady on.
Way.
I think she is the most attractive one in the villa at the moment. I mean, I say that.
Of course she is. She's Welsh.
I should specify, because people might be listening to this section, every single person on that show is attractive.
Conventionally speaking.
Yes. So it is one of those things where, like, when I say that one person is more attractive than another one, it is already on a ridiculous scale. Like, if I went in there, I would look like a troll next to any of these people. So, like, when I say that, like, this person's the most attractive, it's already on a ridiculous level of attractiveness. But she's more my type, I guess. If I fancied ladies, she would be a much more of my thing. And she's Welsh. And she has been slowly teaching the villa an occasional thing in Welsh.
Is this where your latest fascination with the Welsh language has come from?
No, to be fair, I started teaching
apart from the
myself.
fact that you actually visited Wales as well.
To be fair, I started teaching myself before the season started airing. My visit to Wales pushed me to finally actually start, as opposed to just thinking about starting for years on end. But I had already started teaching myself by the time we started watching, and there was a little bit where they were waking up and people were saying bore da as they were waking up in the morning, and I thought that would make you happy, that there's a load of very shallow, attractive people that are from Essex or whatever that now know a few Welsh words.
That does make me very happy indeed, because I distinctly remember in the 2000s there was a Welsh contestant on Big Brother. Do you remember Big Brother?
I do remember Big Brother.
Yeah, there was a Welsh contestant on Big Brother, and he was incredibly patriotic, and everything was about how wonderful Wales is and so on. And because his personality was defined by the fact that he was Welsh, at some point during the series, the housemates were given a task to learn some Welsh by the end of the week, and if they did a really good job, they'd get lots of money to spend on food, something like that. But they were split up into groups, and one group was given the task of, let's do the Welsh thing. And I can't remember how it came about. I don't know if they intentionally did it, but they gave the task to the two people who did not like the Welsh guy. And they, while having to do it, said something along the lines of, well, I don't understand why we have to do this anyway. It's not a real language. And as you can tell, I've held on to my bitterness regarding that for about 15 years. And I'm still quite cross with that. So it's nice to hear that Welsh is featuring in a reality TV show where there are non-Welsh speakers using it in a fun, jovial way.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen loads of it, but there's like an occasional thing where you see her teaching another little bit. Or somebody that is not her will say something like Borada in Welsh.
It's great, isn't it? Because, like, you know how I'm not a reality TV person whatsoever, but you know that you can say, oh yeah, somebody Welsh is on there and can, you know, has been using some Welsh phrases, and you know that it'll just get me on board straight away.
I know. Will you start watching Love Island now?
I don't know if I'll go that far, but it always gets us on board.
It did start, so normally on Love Island there's like a singular Welsh person. It's the Welsh people are like the black people, where there's like token.
The token Welsh person.
Yeah. Where they do have more people of color this year, and they did start with 2 Welsh people.
Ooh.
But then the Welsh dude dropped out. He just asked to leave.
He realised what he was doing with his life.
I think it was because he thought he was going to go in and everyone was going to love him, and then they didn't, and he didn't know what to do.
Yeah. It's a very and we've spoken about this on our other podcast, but it's a very peculiar environment in which you enter if you go on a show like that.
Yeah.
Which I certainly wouldn't be able to cope with it, partly because
no.
I would be the only guy there not rocking a six-pack. But even if I was rocking a six-pack, I just would not gel with that sort of environment.
Obviously, my sexuality aside, I would not do very well on that show. Although it would be fun to throw in an asexual in there because they wouldn't be swayed by, like, the hottest, most attractive person.
Well, it would certainly add to a more social experiment side. Do you remember the days when Big Brother used to promote itself as a social experiment?
Yes.
And it was also a way that people could comfortably admit that they were watching Big Brother without having to admit that they were watching trashy reality TV.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a social experiment. It helps us understand who we are as people. The reason I mention this is because there's rumours that Big Brother is going to return to the UK with an emphasis on, and I quote, the social experiment.
Oh, I told you, like, when we did our episode on Love is Blind.
Yeah, you've always found the anthropology in Love Island.
Well, in Love is Blind describes itself as a social experiment.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? And to its credit, it did achieve that in terms of the conversation that we had on this very podcast.
Again, I will argue that we could have a discussion, a really detailed, educational, academic discussion on any reality TV show.
We could.
It might not always be centered on religion, but I could do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I wouldn't put that past you at all.
If you are interested in hearing an academic podcast on reality television, hit me up. I would love to do it. I would love to do it. It would be so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good fun.
But
although
this episode is not on reality television.
No.
Unfortunately. I will do another one on reality TV soon. We've already had another detailed discussion on this podcast on a reality TV show, which was The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which is currently our best and most downloaded episode of this podcast. And I am intending on doing a revisit of it. I just have to get the time to rewatch a lot of that season and give you timestamps. But once that happens,
it was a really enjoyable podcast. I did really enjoy recording that all.
Reality television is interesting, Alan.
Yeah, it is. It's just I don't know. I find reality TV hooks me in when I guess the emphasis isn't on ridiculously attractive people being ridiculously attractive, and I find so much reality TV now revolves around ridiculously attractive people being ridiculously attractive and often very wealthy at the same time as well, just to really, grind you down a bit.
So, okay, this is my last bit on Love Island, and then I promise we will get into the conversation about Pilgrimage soon, but, just because you mentioned this, on Love Island, there was a period of time where they had loads of, like, Instagram influencers and stuff that would come up, and they got back to their roots of, like, normal people. Like, one of the guys who I think is one of the more attractive men on there, although he's got the most stupid tattoos. They are the worst tattoos I've ever seen in my life. But the rest of him is okay.
Okay, you can't leave it at that. Give us an example.
I will send you a photo. You know what? Okay. I will link the photo in the description of this episode as well if anyone wants to see it.
It can't even be described. That's how... It's abstract.
It looks like he went into a tattoo place and just grabbed random tattoos and just said, stick them anywhere. They're not related at all. They don't like, you know when you get like a nice sleeve where it all kind of like flows into each other? None of that. It's just bad. When he's wearing a shirt, he's fine.
Okay. But when you can't see the atrocities on his
I
arm.
will grab a picture of him. I will send it to you at the end of this episode, and then I will also maybe even put it in the description of this if anyone wants to, who is listening, who doesn't watch Love Island, who wants to see some bad tattoos. But anyway, he's like a fishmonger. Like, normal dude with a normal job. He just happens to be super attractive. Okay. The Welsh chick is a paramedic. So you get, like, these normal jobs. Then they decided for some reason it was smart to throw a 19-year-old on the show. I very much disagree with this decision. But she is Michael Owen's daughter, who is a very famous footballer.
He's Welsh.
Is he? Well, I guess his last name's Owen. I guess.
But I think he played. I think he played for England.
That's fair. He's a big footballer. They have like not only just like so she grew up with not only like professional footballer money, but like Michael Owen footballer money.
Yeah, so she is loaded beyond belief. Beyond belief.
So she's having a conversation with Welsh boy before he left about like, oh, so what do you do? She's a international dressage person, which already shows just how rich she is.
Yes, I was going to say that's so rich I don't even know what it is.
And then she mentioned
I'm too poor to comprehend what that is.
And then she mentioned that she had 12 horses that all stay on her estate that she lives on. At her house. And you see this guy's face going, you are a level of rich I cannot even fathom.
Yeah, that's an obscene amount of wealth.
She just doesn't have
I'm about to stop
money.
singing the international.
Owning a horse is already a ridiculous amount of money. Owning 12 horses, I can't even.
That you've just got on your... Also having property large enough to hold those horses.
Goddamn. So, yeah. Anyway. Okay. But she's I think the exception to the rich rule. At least at the moment. You get an occasional really posh person on there, but then you get people that are like, I don't know, man, I live a normal life. I'm pulling up his tattoos. Give me a second.
I'm kind of surprised that they didn't put her in a celebrity edition, because daughter of a famous person counts as a celebrity on these things.
I don't know how well you can see that.
Well, I can make out the butterfly, and there's a snake with some... Oh yeah, that does look like a random mismatch of...
Yeah, so he's got wings, like, on his clavicle.
Yes,
he's got a snake between his breasts.
And then down to his... He's got
a date, I think it was like 1995, and we did the math on his age, and it is not the age that, like, the year that he was born. We don't know what it means.
Did some football team do well in 1995?
I mean, don't know.
Presumably, somebody won the football
match. He's got a butterfly under the snake, above the date, and there's just lots of patches of skin between all of these. It's bad.
Well, maybe he'll get more. Maybe he'll get maybe he's building a menagerie. A tattoo menagerie on his chest. And the final product may be stupendous.
Okay, well now that we have
we are all works in progress, Vivian.
We have talked for 15 minutes on Love Island, which I already love. But that is not what we were here to talk about. I'm so sorry.
No, but we are experimenting with this new cold open segment, which... I quite like.
It allows me to talk about Love Island for 15 minutes before
it allows you to talk about Love Island. It gets it out of your system so that we know you're done for the day.
Oh, right. I'm not done for the day. I've got a podcast on the last episode I need to listen to. Because this is my life. I watch an hour and a half of Love Island, and then I listen to an hour and a half long podcast talking about that episode.
Is it on again tonight?
It is. This is what I do. This is my life now.
I thought you seemed happier than usual today. That you just seem to have a spring in your step that
Inundated with reality TV is how I love to live.
I just logged on to Zoom and thought, oh, Dr. Asimos is in a very chirpy mood today.
I love that you just think of me as only Dr. Asimos.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Anyway, Dr. Asimos is going to be talking about pilgrimage today.
Yes.
We talked about pilgrimage before, which got me thinking about pilgrimage again. And I wanted to tell a little bit of a story. Those of our listeners, I know that we have a lot of listeners that are PhD students or academics. We also have those who aren't. Welcome to those who aren't. But this story is for those of you who are. I wrote an article that was supposed to be published in a journal that was about the fan convention as an act of pilgrimage. I had gone to, it was a very small fan convention for a YouTuber called Jesse Cox. It was called CoxCon. It always sounded like I was going to a porn convention whenever I told people I was going to CoxCon. But it was for the YouTuber Jesse Cox. I was going there because at the time I was doing research on horror online, and part of my thing was on horror video games. And Jesse has a section on his YouTube channel called Scary Game Squad. And all of the members of the Scary Game Squad were going to be there at that fan convention. It always takes place in England every year, even though he's American. So it was really easy for me to go there. I got a media pass as being a scholar to do research there. So I got to go there for free, which was rad. Nice. Thank you guys so much still. I still very much appreciate it. The organizers were very kind and very accommodating and didn't think I was too weird. So I went there to try to talk about horror games. No one was that interested in talking to me about video games. Everyone was talking to me about the fan convention.
Well, they were hyped.
They were hyped. They were there. They were loving the fact that they were there. They were super excited about being there. They wanted to talk about being there. It was a moment.
That's understandable.
It was very understandable, and I very quickly decided I'm not going anywhere with this. Before lunch, I was like, you know what? I'll just talk to people about the convention and I'll gather some stuff. And as I was there and recording things and talking to people and noting stuff, I realized that there's something really cool here to talk about this fan convention as a form of pilgrimage. That there was a lot of similar languages going on. There was a lot of the same kind of fervor. A lot of the way they were connecting to the convention space was what you would kind of expect to hear from a lot of pilgrimage sites. So I was like, oh, this would be really rad. So I wrote a little article about it. I also talked about it at a academic conference. Although it is essentially a convention, isn't it? Yeah, I went to the Open University. It was another one where I got to hang out with Aled again. It was back in the days when that was the only time we would see each other, was at our various conferences.
Yes.
And I gave the talk. It was very well received. There were some people who specialize in pilgrimage that really liked it, including one of my academic loves, Marion Bowman. I love her so much.
I'm just going to say for the record here, Marion supervised my PhD alongside Paul
She's such a lovely human being.
She rocks. She rocks.
And I tweeted about it because I always live tweeted my conference goings, and Jesse Cox retweeted the fact that I did the presentation, and that was rad. It's the highlight of my career. So I decided to write this article that was basically the same things that I had presented on, and it got rejected. It was the only academic paper that I've ever gotten fully rejected rather than just make these changes. And it got rejected because they said that I should have gone to the conference and basically been doing a full study of fan conventions as pilgrimage. Despite the fact that I was very clear in the description of my time there as saying I went there for a different purpose. The fervor of it got caught up, and that was really interesting, and it was way more interesting than what I went there to talk to people about in the first place. So the resulting article was actually a complaint on fieldwork in anthropology and the study of religion, which you can now find in Fieldwork and Religion, my complaint about that, and how research in religious studies, and particularly in anthropology of religion, should be more accepting of the flow that happens in fieldwork.
Yeah, flexibility.
The flexibility of it. The fact that we have to adjust when we enter a field, and that is what I did. And I actually found something, like I said, I found it way more interesting than what I was originally there for. I do wish I had started out my research, my whole PhD, doing fan convention as pilgrimage. It would have been really rad. It's not what I was doing. I was already way deep in a completely different thing. But it was a shame that it wasn't really seen that way. But I got a really cool article out of it complaining about it.
Yes, and I think there's definitely seeds of that article, which I've recommended to students in the past.
Yeah, I mean,
seeds of that article in your current research.
Yeah, definitely.
And what you're doing right now.
That I'm doing right now. I even mention it a little bit in the article that I complained in. And actually in that article, I do quote one of my reviewers, who I then found out was someone that I knew. But that is a separate conversation for a separate time. I don't think they even realized that I quoted them, and in a negative light. So hopefully they're still fine with it.
Well, don't make the situation worse for yourself on a recorded podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the person is very nice. I don't think I knew they were one of my reviewers. I don't know if they were the one that I quoted. But
I think when we're talking about methodology and fieldwork in the study of religions, what you're describing here is a methodological issue. What happens when you find yourself in the field and nobody wants to talk to you about what you want to talk about? That alone is a methodological issue that is worth discussing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they present you with data that is also interesting in the academic study of religions, that is worth discussing as well. I'm a big believer in the flexibility of a researcher, because fieldwork throws unexpected things at you. Not just how somebody may, you're going to CoxCon, somebody just wants to talk about Jesse Cox. The way I think about this is like if I was at a concert, for example, I was seeing a particular band I loved, and then you came up to me, Vivian, and said, "Oh, let's talk about The Legend of Zelda. You love Legend of Zelda, Aled." I would say, "Yeah, I do love Legend of Zelda, but right now I'm here to talk about this band because I'm amped about. I'd rather talk about this band because I'm amped to see this band." So, when you find people, they will respond to you differently in different circumstances. It's not just about your role as a researcher and where you are and how you're influencing the people around you. It's what they're currently doing as well and the role that they are inhabiting. So a lot of people I've done fieldwork with, for example, work for an institution, and therefore I was getting answers from them that were on behalf of an institution, not necessarily as the individual. So you're always going to be presented with different things, and that's okay. And as long as you recognise that, that your data is being shifted by these, we always say on this podcast that everyone has agency. Everyone changes their minds about things. Everybody does things differently. We even said in our last podcast on Dune that there are Islams and arguably an Islam for every single Muslim in the world, depending on different perspectives. So I think that we need to be careful to not be too rigid with our questions, for example. So when I've done fieldwork interviews in the past, I've had a series of questions that I know I want to ask. But sometimes the conversation has just gone so interesting in an area that I didn't think it would. A phrase I often use is, I just go where the research takes me.
Mm-hmm.
And if the research takes me somewhere interesting, I'll go with it. So I think the idea of turning up to CoxCon, wanting to discuss one thing, but ending up going down a totally different path because of these methodological issues that we discussed, which I guess makes it perfect for Fieldwork and Religion, which is a great journal. That's great. Because that's lived religion. And, I know I have a reputation for being a lived religion fanboy, but the whole point of lived religion is that it's not as you would expect on the textbook. You are thrown into surprising situations. You are presented with surprises. And if you're going to expect all of that, why are you even doing this in the first place?
Yeah.
Isn't it to be to sound a little bit Star Trek about it all, to be exploring the unknown. Sorry, I'll get off my high horse now.
No, that's fine. I think it'll be very good for as I said, the listeners that we have that are maybe in the midst of their PhD or are encountering a similar issue. Try not to let it get to you, and quote my article.
Well, I wrote an entire article about how some of my fieldwork participants were essentially, I'll word it delicately, were essentially wanting access to my written work prior to publication for edits and suggestions and so forth. And again, that's something that I didn't expect to happen, but it's something that you then have to contend with, the people that you work with, you know. People aren't obliged to give you access.
Yeah.
You have to maintain access through a variety of ways, and if they want to shut the door, that's absolutely fine. But fieldwork is all about the unexpected.
Yeah, and I brought up this story for two reasons. One, in hopes that I make someone feel better about themselves, but also because I have not really had the chance to re-explore this idea in a different context. Not yet. And like you said, this is somewhat tied to some of the stuff that I'm doing right now. I have, within the last couple of months, I have gone to Cause Expo, which is a convention. Well, they describe it not as a convention, but as an expo rather than, which is different. But it's all for cosplay. And I have also been to MCM London. Next month, I am going to be going to MegaCon Manchester.
Look at all these humble brags.
I know. And then we are talking about potentially trying to do MCM London again in October.
Your life is so exciting right now.
So that's kind of what has been going on in my brain for my current research project. And I have been very struck by how, when I initially did the CoxCon article, it was very much this is a snapshot of CoxCon 2017, which was when I went. Now feels like a lifetime ago.
A lifetime ago, yes.
But that was the year that I went. The following year would have also been really interesting in terms of grieving a celebrity. Because one of the YouTubers that Jesse Cox always did collaborations with died of cancer a month or two after the CoxCon that I attended. And it was very much felt in that community. And so it would have been interesting. I would have felt very bad doing it, but it would have been interesting doing research there as far as grieving the celebrity death. But I wasn't in attendance that year. And it would be interesting to also compare something like MCM London now to MCM London prior to 2020. And the difference in the feelings of being away from conventions for 2 years before being able to return. But during all of this, I'm seeing a lot of the same aspects that I saw in CoxCon 2017. I had kind of painted it as this is a snapshot of one con at 1 year, and it might be really different in other cons in other years, but this is what I found here. And I am now very much more firmly set on, no, I think this is a thing. So I'm going to talk about it. Because I want to, and I think it's interesting. And it does help to piggyback off of a previous, I think the second episode of this season, when we talked about Turning Red and the question of pilgrimage versus tourism. And I think there is a similar discussion here of what is a pilgrim, but I think it might be fun to kind of just start the discussion already from where we left off in that Turning Red episode. And I think we both finished that Turning Red episode saying that there really isn't a big difference between a pilgrim and a tourist. And it's purely in essentially the way the individual is going to choose to describe themselves. And what I find interesting about convention goers is that they don't describe themselves as a tourist, because they're not really there as a tourist. They're not walking around London as a tourist. They're staying in the convention hall. They might pop out of the convention hall to go to grab lunch. A lot of cosplayers will pop out and meet photographers and take photos outside of the convention hall.
But from an economic perspective, they are engaging in tourism.
Yes, I mean, they are there, but they wouldn't
if they are spending money in a cafe
at a hotel,
in London,
they're grabbing food. They are spending money, but they would not describe themselves as a tourist because they are not there in a tourist fashion. They're not there to go to Windsor or whatever. Yes,
I guess the location is inconsequential. It doesn't matter whether the con is in London or in Birmingham. The con is the con.
Yeah.
So the area itself.
The area is only important in the ease it is to get to that location.
A means to an end.
And that is it. And there is a really interesting conversation about the convention location itself, which I will talk about. But at the moment, we will kind of put that to the side. But I am going to kind of take our previous episode as a jumping off point. We talked about pop culture pilgrimages like Elvis and Graceland and Ghibli and Harry Potter. And I think this might be slightly different. Because again, you're not going to Edinburgh to see the sights of Harry Potter. You're going to a convention hall, which is a lot like most other convention halls. But it's suddenly filled with the thing you want it to be filled with. And that feels like a slightly different environment. But we'll talk again. I have a separate section that I will talk about landscape. Yeah. And that is when we will talk about that. But I just kind of wanted to say that I think all of these discussions of the pop culture pilgrim, the tourist versus the pilgrim, the idea of a quote unquote secular pilgrimage is all going to be kind of in the background of this conversation. And we can kind of bring them in when they seem to make sense in the conversation. But I wanted to start by doing one of my favorite things, which is pushing definitions. We've already kind of started pushing the definition of a pilgrim and pilgrimage to a different point, saying, you know, what is really the difference between a tourist and a pilgrim? See previous conversation. But I'm going to do what I really like to do, which is when I do this with religion, it is let's see it in a different context and not ask the question of, is this religion? But asking the question of, what can religion be?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I am asking the question in this. I'm saying this is pilgrimage, but in that process, I am really asking the question of, what can pilgrimage be? What can it be understood as? What can it be manifested in? What can it really be when we let it be seen in a variety of different contexts? So, out of curiosity, Aled, have you attended anything that could be described as a fan convention before? It is fine if the answer is no.
No, the answer is yes.
Okay, explain. What are your stories?
I went to, in 2010, I went to the Summer of Sonic convention. You could tell there was hesitance in my voice there to admit on record. But I'm going to double down. I've been a big Sonic the Hedgehog fan ever since I was a kid. It's no surprise to anyone listening to this podcast by now that both Vivian and I are huge video game fans. And everybody's got that one gateway video game. And for me, it was Sonic the Hedgehog. And in 2010, a friend and I went to the Summer of Sonic, which is a fan-run convention for all things Sonic the Hedgehog. However, Sega and Sonic Team, the creators and makers of Sonic games, had a hand in it. They set up some booths there that had demos of some forthcoming games, which was really good. I mean, the games themselves were not good, but it was really good. It was good that those were there. Some of the writers of the Sonic comics were there doing art for people, signing stuff. There were competitions where people were singing songs from the Sonic franchise in a karaoke way. Who wins that, for example? There were cosplays of various Sonic characters. I was wearing a Sonic t-shirt and a Sonic hoodie, so I was engaging in some of the specialist clothing, so to speak. But I wasn't cosplaying. But I was clearly there for Sonic purposes. And the day was rounded off with a performance from rock band Crush 40, who had been making the really cheesy rock music that you hear in Sonic games from the Sonic Adventure games onwards. They put on a hour-long performance of Sonic classics that the audience sang along to, and it was okay. It was just the guitarist and the singer, because they're a guitarist and a singer and session musicians, and because they didn't have the session musicians with them, they were playing to a backing tape, which, was a little awkward. But it was Sonic songs sung in a live thing. So that is my con experience. It's not MCM or anything grandiose like that. I didn't get to meet a member of the cast of Star Trek or something like that. But it was quite niche in that sense. Very nerdy. There was a moment when we pulled up outside the venue, because we actually took a taxi, and the taxi driver looked at the venue, saw the people outside in all this Sonic gear and Sonic outfits, looked at us in our Sonic clothes, and said, "What's happening here today?" And we both felt so awkward that we said, "A band is playing," which was technically true, but we didn't admit. And I do think about how I've changed now, because now I would just say what we were there for. But yeah, I was in my early 20s at the time. Being cool meant something to me, so we were there to see a band. But we didn't.
I like how being cool meant something to you, but you went to a Sonic fan convention.
Yeah, I know. I'm a complex creature, Vivian. There's many layers to me.
There is nuance.
Whereas, compared to my one niche con experience, you have not dipped your toes, but dived into cons in recent months.
In recent months, yes. Previously, I have attended a couple. I used to be a fan of Rooster Teeth, which is an online gaming / production company. I haven't watched their stuff in years now, but I used to be very, very into it. And they had a London fan convention, and I went to that one and had a great time. I knew a couple of people in the community. I used to go to the UK kind of just fans meeting up on their own and hanging out stuff, so I already knew a couple of them. So it was a bit like, hey, I know you, and I only see you at this kind of event. Kind of like how we were at academic
weddings
conventions.
And funerals. Yes. Yeah, that is very true. That is how we used to be.
It was a very, very similar vibe, but very different environment. And that was fun. I actually had a friend who I knew from my undergrad, which I did back in America, who had been doing their master's in London. And so we got to meet up for dinner the night before, and then we hung out at the convention together. So it was kind of nice to also be meeting an old friend. I obviously went to CoxCon. I went to CoxCon with research in mind, but I honestly, I was pushed to go to an in-person thing by my supervisor because doing everything online seemed ridiculous, and I needed to do at least something that was in person. So I chose to go to the Jesse Cox one because I just wanted to go.
How times change.
I know. I just wanted to go, so I kind of just was like, well, I'll do some research there, but I'll just be able to enjoy it. And I did actually do a couple of the meeting of, I say celebrities, they're all just online personalities that outside of very specific circles, no one knows. But I got to go and meet a couple of them and do those kinds of things. But at MCM and stuff, I've been trying to do a little bit more of the specific research hat, which is a little bit of a different experience than going purely for the fun of it. And I was trying to remember going for the Rooster Teeth one because it was actually at the same exact hall. MCM was in the same exact convention center as the Rooster Teeth one. So I was trying to remember kind of what that was like and whether or not it felt differently and all that kind of thinking way too hard about things, because that's what you have to do when you're doing field work. But I've been really enjoying my time. I don't know if I would be going if it wasn't part of what I do. I'm not a big fan of lots of people. And it's
Just
a lot
generally,
of
course.
people. I don't really know. I really enjoyed CoxCon. I think CoxCon was the right amount of people. It was like, I think 1,500 people.
Okay, yes.
Which is a substantial amount for a really niche thing.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely nothing compared to an MCM. You know, MCM is going to have,
Tens of
500,000. I wouldn't be surprised. I did have some numbers from Gamescom back in 2018 because I pulled it from my old article that I tried to get published before. So I grabbed some numbers. So Gamescom in 2018 had 370,000 participants, with 1,037 exhibitors. So for people who haven't been, a lot of things like MCM in particular have a lot of, it's basically all exhibitor halls. So you go and there's like booths and tables set up of people selling, their comic books or those Funko Pops, many of them selling Funko Pops. You have like nerdy t-shirts that they'll be selling, or there were authors that were there selling their books, and I'm probably going to, the next times that I go, I will hopefully be sat in one of those seats selling my book. So that's the goal for the next times.
Will you have a Funko Pop of yourself?
No, but that. So it's very kind of
I love how you answered that seriously.
Well, I mean, there was a point where I was like, I don't even know if I want to see that.
I can imagine it. Pen and notepad.
I barely want to see my author bio photos when those things pop up in places, let alone have like a Funko Pop version of me. But yeah, so if, it's a very kind of commercially driven type environment. It's a lot of, you go there for the purpose of meeting up with people, but also for kind of seeing whose wares are being sold and what you can grab that is unique that you would not be able to grab somewhere else.
And there's certain elements of these, pilgrimages that are hidden behind paywalls, essentially.
Yeah.
You'll go to a con, but then if you want to meet this certain celebrity, you've got to pay to get into their bit.
You pay for signings and stuff.
Yeah, and then if you want the meet and greet, you've got to pay for that. And then if you want the photo, you've got to pay for that. It seems very costly.
Mm-hmm. It is. So that's an element of it. But I think when we were talking about pilgrimage and tourism, I think we discussed that kind of financial, commercial side of it is kind of everywhere.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so I don't know if that necessarily discounts it from this experience.
No, it doesn't at all.
Another thing that I think was a really interesting commentary, particularly at CoxCon, and I will also explain some of the stories, both at CoxCon as well as in my more recent times, in regards to this, but as pilgrimage, as a travel to the home. A lot of people think of pilgrimage, I think, like tourism in the sense that you are traveling away from your home to a location and then you travel back. What is interesting about these conventions is that it is seen as essentially a homecoming a lot of the times. So this was particularly prevalent in CoxCon. I talked to quite a few people there, and most of them, I think, 90% of the people I spoke to actually used the words coming home, or it's like coming home, or this feels like home in the conversation with me. And then the other one just described feelings that were very much alongside what these other people were describing, but they didn't use the word. But
yeah,
the phrasing of feeling like I'm coming home, this feels like home to me, is a very common one that I found in CoxCon. And Interestingly, when I was at MCM, I did a bit of camping out in the cosplay area for obvious reasons. That's what I'm there to do research on. And they have like a little stage where people were coming up and doing little talks and stuff. So I spent a lot of time sat there listening to people and seeing what different costumes there were and stuff like that. And the first person kind of comes on who's like the MC of the day and said, welcome everybody. Is this your first, for some of you, this is your second day, shout if this is your second day. Cause I came on the second day of the con. And some people went, woo, and then it was like, who's here for their first day? And there was another group of woo. And they said, well, welcome back home. And then went on with the MCing. And it was a thing of, that was essentially this idea of being around people like me is the kind of coherent idea in this. And it's not that much of a contrast to some pilgrimages. Are you familiar with route pilgrimages much?
No.
So this was something that I kind of came across when I was doing a lot of pilgrimage research. And routes pilgrimages were described as the kinds of pilgrimages that people do when they are going to an ancestral homeland.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Going back to one's roots.
And
yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of Americans that do this, like going to Ireland or going to Scotland as the thing. But I don't think it's quite the same weight as something like there are a lot of people of color in America that do this by going to Africa. Which is a very different experience than the white person going to Scotland. That going to a place where everyone is like me. I am no longer the minority. I am the majority here. This is where my family was taken. This is where I belong, is a very strong feeling. And I feel slightly uncomfortable comparing this to conventions because obviously it is a very, very different connection. But this is an example of a pilgrimage as not a travel away from home, but as a travel to a home. That I think is a really important thing to keep in mind. That it is not always away, that it can be too. And that there was so much focus on these. I'm going here because I don't normally feel comfortable in myself and what I like. I'm going to tell the taxi driver that I'm going to see a band rather than to go see Sonic because I'm used to people looking down on this. But as soon as I'm in that hall, I can go nuts about Sonic and no one's going to judge me because everyone's going nuts about Sonic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So there was a really interesting moment when I was doing my CoxCon research where I have a bit of social anxiety. So whenever I do research like this, I always have to take lots of breaks. And so I was taking one particular break and someone was chatting with me because this is what happens sometimes when you're at a convention is people just come and sit with you and chat with you, which is great for me. And I was explaining to the person, I'm here, I'm doing research just so that way they knew. And I said, but I'm taking a break right now because I have a lot of social anxiety. So I kind of need to take breaks every so often. And they said, oh, I have social anxiety too, but that's why I really love coming here. And I was like, what are you on about? There's 1,500 people in this room. How are you not, how is this a positive thing for you if this is something that you experience? And she said, well, it's because I know that everyone has my same values. Which was really interesting, because it's like, well, everyone here just likes the same YouTuber.
Yeah, but funnily enough, I had a very similar experience at the My Chemical Romance tour last month. That at both shows I went to, there was almost a feeling of belonging with fans. And I've been on the My Chemical Romance subreddit over the past few weeks, just reading people's posts from the tour and stuff, and so many of them have firstly described finally getting to see the band live after the hiatus and so on as a religious experience, which ties in with the previous conversation we've had about people comparing quote unquote secular things with religiosity to also emphasize importance. I've seen a lot of that, but I've also seen a lot of people write extensive posts online about how going to that concert made them feel like they had friends because they had this shared interest, and this shared interest also suggested shared values.
Yeah.
Something that was absolutely wonderful at the 2 shows I went to was the visible representation of the LGBT community in terms of banners, outfits, colour schemes and clothing that people were wearing. There were so many trans banners, pride banners and so forth at the shows, at the barriers being waved around. It was a safe space, so to speak, that if you're fans of this particular band, you know that this band holds these values and that they are welcoming of their LGBT fans. And therefore it was a safe space to carry your trans banners. It was a safe space to dress however you want. If you did want to wear the, white face paint with black eyeliner and so on, then you could. And so many people have discussed that online since that I found really interesting, that idea of feeling at home somewhere that isn't home in the sense that it's where they live and where they were raised.
But that it's a spiritual home, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. So there's that. So there's that element of pilgrimage, of traveling to see something, to do something, but almost the idea of returning to somewhere that they've never actually been before.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some really lovely accounts online of people saying that it was the first time that they went to the concert on their own because they didn't have any friends who liked the band. But then while they were in the queue, they made friends for life there, and they felt a kinship with those people that they haven't felt with others.
Yeah, very common story. Yeah.
And then it comes back to that lovely anecdote you just shared about the person with social anxiety. That going to that space negates some of the social anxiety because they know that they're surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah, they know they won't strike up a conversation with the person in front of them in the queue and that person's a bigot because they're like, well, that person wouldn't be here.
It wouldn't. Exactly.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't expect to, you know that you could take a pride banner, for example, to a My Chemical Romance concert and be welcomed among the crowds.
Yeah.
And so forth. In fact, at the second show I went to, I did place a pride banner over the barrier for someone who asked me to place it there, and I held on to it throughout the concert to make sure it didn't blow away and things. It was just absolutely lovely. And just, I guess I'm now talking about my own experience of it, but when I certainly doom scroll a lot on social media and see how terrible the world is, and there's a lot of awful, terrible, bigoted people and so on. But it was just a really wonderful couple of days of being in the company of people with progressive values and who were just there, who were there excited because this art that they love is being performed live. And I don't know, it was just really lovely, and I guess I'm still on a buzz.
Yeah.
Myself from that.
From your own pilgrimage.
Yeah, absolutely.
To, I guess, kind of a fan convention in a sense.
Well, it is in the sense that it's
fan
all
gathering.
Fan gathering to just dress in the merchandise and talk about this band before they come on stage, obviously. And then, of course, that cathartic experience of the performance. Because I'm not a mosh pit person. But there are pits in the centre of the crowd at my camp concerts. And they're always very, vigilant to their whole, if people fall down, pick them up rule, be good to each other. But I know a lot of people love getting into those because they just find the experience cathartic. Of just, there's loud music and they'll just run and slam into each other. It's not me at all. I like to watch the band that I've paid to see.
Yeah.
So I will stand away from the pit.
I think I've told you that my favorite concert experience was that everyone was just calmly sat in theater seats watching the performance. Yeah. That's my kind of gig.
Yeah. I like to jump up and down and I like to dance. and clap along, but I don't like to shove people, so I stand to the side, because the pit is always in the centre. It's just the thing. So I always stand to the left or the right at a gig to make sure that I don't get dragged into it. But yeah, there seemed to be a really good vibe around that as well. Interestingly, at the Milton Keynes show, talking about this kinship, at the Milton Keynes show, there was a moment halfway through the show where in the middle of the crowd, all these arms raised up in the air and all started pointing at a certain area. There was a circle, a huge circle in the audience of arms in the air pointing into a certain bit, and somebody had collapsed. So then security then came in and pulled them out. But it was just this really wonderful moment where everybody, because obviously, people on the outside of the circle couldn't see what was going on, but they figured out something was happening. So there was just a sea of arms pointing at a particular point into the crowd. That was just wild to see, because at that show we were sat in seats. And then in the Cardiff show, I don't mean to brag, but I was at the front. If we're talking about life-affirming experiences and so on. But sorry, I've just hijacked the conversation, but what you were just telling me there did evoke the feelings that I've had over the past few months.
Yeah.
And that I've seen people discuss in an online space that, can be very powerful, because we find in the study of popular culture, we can be defined by the things we love.
Of course.
And something that really annoys me is I've seen it happen online a lot recently. Oh, you can't base your whole personality off a piece of pop culture. So you can't base your whole personality off this or that. And it's not that people are it's not that people are basing their personality. It's that this is part of who they are. This is part of their personality.
I was about to say, I think a lot of it is that they see their personality in this piece of pop culture rather than the other way around. Because I think that there are pieces of pop culture that I like, but they are not going to be a part of me in the way of something where if I watch it and I go, oh my god, that's me, that's my soul. I think we were having a conversation in text yesterday about music that has a piece of our soul in it, and I told you the two opening lines in the song The Breaking of the Fellowship is where my soul resides. That
is where your soul is.
And it wasn't that I listened to it and went, I really like this music, I will think of it in this way. It's that I listened to that and I went, oh my god, this is my heart. So anyway, I highly suggest listening at least to the first two notes of that song. The rest of the song is also very beautiful, of course. But
well, the thing with music from The Lord of the Rings is that I obviously recognise all of it, but I don't know it by track names. So what bit in the film?
So
Breaking of the Fellowship, I can kind of guess.
The Breaking of the Fellowship is the song that plays right at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring when, the Fellowship gets broken apart and they're all in different areas, and the Merry and Pippin get taken by orcs, and Sam and Frodo have their scene in the lake. It's when that is happening.
Yeah, the music is stunning during that sequence.
Oh my god! I mean, the music throughout the whole thing is so gorgeous, but that song is one of my favorites of all three films. It's one of my favorite songs.
And I think on a similar note, the music that plays, I can't remember what the piece is called, but the theme for the Shire.
Oh right, yeah.
It's just a perfect piece of music for what you're looking at, because it just evokes feelings of home and warmth.
Hans Zimmer can learn something from Howard Shore. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
If it was Hans Zimmer, it just would have been blah and everything.
Blah, 2 notes. Yeah.
Oh my god, my waveform for blah was great to look at. Anyway, we're going to shift a little bit, because before we end, I wanted to talk about one little aspect of pilgrimage that I think is really important in just general, as well as for the conversation of this in particular, which is the concept of landscape and of quote unquote sacred landscape that pilgrimage typically is moving through or engaging with or looking at. And I mean, we could have an entire separate episode on just the idea of landscape, so I will try not to spend too much time engaging with it. But I think a lot of the times humans think of landscape as something that is non-human. So like I was just recently in the Welsh countryside, and we were in the Brecon Beacons, and stood on top of a hill and looking at this landscape around me, and there was an occasional little pop of a village, but we were the only people in this area, seeing no one else around us. Yeah. That's probably what people would think of as landscape when you are talking about landscape. My husband does landscape photography for a hobby, and he always likes to take photos where you see no human element in it. I prefer ones that have a lot of the human element in it, because humans are a part of the landscape. Yeah,
this is the anthropologist.
I'm gonna do the father currently of all contemporary anthropology, Tim Ingold, who has been quoted. You cannot find a piece of contemporary anthropology that does not have Tim Ingold quoted somewhere in it. He is my academic grandfather. He supervised my supervisor's PhD. So I call him my academic grandfather.
Yeah.
But he has written quite a lot on landscape, so I will try not to repeat too much of it right now. But the biggest thing that he talks about is the human element in landscape, that an urban landscape is just as much of a landscape as the Brecon Beacons. Cardiff is as much of a landscape as the Brecon Beacons.
Yeah.
This is all part of the same landscape. And the idea of me and my husband there taking photos, walking among sheep, is just as much a part of the Brecon Beacons as the stones just laying there on their own. It's us
you
as well.
Part of it.
And he calls this the dwelling perspective of landscape. The idea that landscape is dwelled in, that it is engaged with in this way, that humans are traps, at least walking through it or present in it or using it for some purpose. And it is all part of this. And because of that, landscape is capable of changing. It is not something that is solid and unique and only in this one form. It is constantly evolving and moving and changing. And I think this is really interesting in regards to the convention space, because we started by talking about this and then I shut you up about it because I was going to come to this conversation of the idea of going to a convention hall when a convention is not on versus going to a convention hall when a convention is on. And I think when we talked about the going home element of it, it's not the convention space, but it is the convention space.
Yes. It is interesting, isn't it? Because when the convention is not on, it's not affiliated in any way. I think in that sense it's different as like a sports team.
Yeah.
Where if a sports team has its own stadium or venue or whatever, that still holds a significance even when there isn't sports taking place. Because it's their place. It is their location. It is their home. Whereas that conference centre will be used for other things a couple of days after the con is over, and has been used for other things in the past. It has its own history.
Yes.
That Jimi Hendrix may have played there or something, I don't know. But it's got its own things that it can boast in its own history. But the building, for the con's sake, is a means to an end. It's the space in which the con can gather.
Yeah.
So it's not the building, it's the people.
It's the people, it's the created environment, in a sense. And,
yes.
it's the CoxCon always took place every year in the same convention hall in Telford. I don't know if they're still in Telford now that, I don't know whether they're back after the pandemic. I say after the pandemic, I acknowledge that it's still going on.
I know what you mean.
But now that cons are back after the initial shutdown for 2 years, I am unsure if CoxCon is back to running. And when it does come back, I don't know if it'll still be at Telford. I'm assuming it will be, because of the fact that it was always there. But I'm sure that those people who talked about the con as coming home, if they went to that Telford Convention Center when CoxCon wasn't on, or when nothing was on, or if something else was on, I don't think they would describe that as home.
No.
That's not the created space, that there is a shift to this landscape that happens when the con
Yes.
is on that
Yes.
makes it that sacred
And it's the same-
ancestral space
Yes.
that they are going to.
And it's the same with a concert.
Mm.
As the venue is the means to an end. You know, you need a good venue, you know, you need
Yeah.
your acoustics and so forth. But at the same time, when you then return to it when there isn't a concert happening, it doesn't hold... It's about the created space at that time, that the artist is there, that the fans are there. That without it, it's simply just a building.
Yep. So anyway, that was a bit of a ramble on my part.
No, that's really interesting, though. And I think what I like about the podcast format in general is that it allows us to ramble in ways that we wouldn't necessarily be able to write.
Yeah, and I re-experiencing this has been really fun for me, and I am unsure how much of this is going to end up in my final book at the end of it.
Plug.
Book plug that's I haven't even written. Go follow me on socials for updates like this.
But eventually you will, and people should buy it.
Pre-order nothing now. If you're interested in kind of following my ramblings as this kind of stuff happens, follow me on social media, because I'll start doing vlogs of this type of ilk at some point, of things that I'm thinking about that may or may not end up in the final product. Because this is research, baby. We do things and we think about really cool things, and then it doesn't end up in the final product.
No, sometimes the research takes you in unexpected directions.
It does, and follow all of that crazy, weird stuff, no matter where it takes you, because you never know. And
Absolutely.
so I've been enjoying this, and I'm glad I got the chance to kind of ramble and get it off my chest, because it has been something that I thought about years ago, and then I forgot about, and then I started going to cons again, and it just hit me again, just right in the brainstem.
It was all coming back to you now, like Celine Dion.
So I'm excited that I got to talk about it. If you enjoyed this, if you have commentary, if you have experiences of fan conventions or concerts or things that we didn't even mention in this that you think really fit what we've been talking about.
Yeah, if you are a participant, so to speak, in these environments, get in touch. We'd love to hear.
Yeah, I would love to hear about the different things that this is similar to or dissimilar from. If there's something that you think kind of throws a wrench in the conversation, then that's something that we like to hear. We build from discourse.
We do.
So shoot us. You can talk to us on Twitter at @RPC_pod, or you can shoot us an email, religionpopculturepod@gmail.com. If someone wants to talk to you specifically, Aled, where can they go?
They can come and find me on Twitter at AledJLL Thomas, and if you want email addresses and so on, come and ask me there.
Yeah. And you can talk to me on Twitter and Instagram at Vivian Asimos. Like I said, I might be doing vlogs soon. I don't know. Let me know if you want to know them. I don't know. I'm still figuring them out. If you're interested, let me know so I know to do them. And I will also be doing updates on the cosplay project on those places. So if you're interested, go there. It's also all being updated as well on my website, incidentalmythology.com. That was a fun ramble. Went from Love Island to fan convention settings to landscape, you know.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
You went where the research took you.
We go, everything is interesting.
Everything is interesting. You just have to find the interesting stuff.
Well,
only boring people are bored.
I always love talking about interesting things with you, Aled. And
I love talking about interesting things with you too, Vivian. Sorry.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Totally.
You're putting me on the spot about it, I guess. No. Well, and thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
Bye, folks.